Let me begin with a little backstory. I lost both parents when I was in high school. I was lonely and considered ending it all more often than I felt optimistic about living a life they'd be proud of. I was raised by my aunt and uncle, who piqued my interest in medicine. My aunt is a doctor, and my uncle always reads about new advancements in the medical field and loves to share all the things I could be doing with the degree. Fast forward to now. They paid for tutoring and helped me get into medical school. For our first year, we were allowed to pick a subject of any choice and do deep investigation and run trials on it, even if it was something wildly optimistic like curing Alzheimer's or eliminating the need for sleep. I chose to find a way for humans to live longer. My college either found programs which would take students in for a semester-long internship, or they would have students work with medical professionals through our university. This was mostly so students could get a glimpse into what it is like for medical professionals to look into a problem and attempt to find solutions. Luckily for me, there's a company, which I cannot name, that is looking for a way to extend the length of human life. They took me in and showed me the ropes. The first day, I learned about all these chemicals, oils, extracts, everything they've been testing which has the possibility to extend or benefit the quality of life for people. A lot of the cures are for end-of-life patients that may want an additional year or so on Earth to be with their families before passing. My team that I was added to was 3 months from testing a new chemical they'd spent the past year developing. I mostly sat in the back and watched the team discuss the positives and negatives of each chemical and the possibilities of them either combining or neutralizing each other when put into one treatment method. Late one night, I read a lot about some remedies that have been recommended in India, which have been used by people that lived late into their 90s and early hundreds. I brought it up to the team, and they were skeptical at best. They had heard about it before, but it was still dangerous, as there had been no clinical testing done on it. I told them perhaps we could do some tests of our own on it, and see how it went. It was agreed we'd start on mice. The drug was administered to a group of 20 mice, and another 20 were given a blend of the medicine they'd created. These mice were pygmy mice, which have a lifespan of 2 years, that had just turned 2 years old. Of my 20 mice, 18 lived for a full 6 months, while only 7 of theirs lasted the same amount of time. My internship was supposed to end just before we finished the testing, but they all agreed it would be best for me to stick around, and I was offered a part-time position at the company. We noticed some small side effects in the mice which didn't appear too bad at the time. My mice were very active at almost all times of the day, and needed half the food and water that a normal mouse needs. We assumed my approach gave some nourishment, which kept the mice from overeating. The thing about testing on mice is that humans eat and drink a lot more, so this would be about the equivalent of a human skipping a meal, which isn't uncommon already. We found a man who was willing to try my remedy, and we began administering the drug to him once a day for 2 weeks. He was not supposed to die anytime soon, or rather, we were just giving him small doses to make sure it was safe. All was well for the first 4 weeks, so we upped the dosage 50% for 2 weeks. He noticed that he was sleeping less after the increase, which prompted us to lower the dosage again. He was on the medicine for 3 months with no side effects, which we counted as a big win. Our next patient was a guy whose kidneys failed completely. He had stage-end renal disease, and his body was rapidly declining. We offered the new drug to him, which he was very optimistic to try. He was only 36 years old, and I knew he wasn't ready to die. I got to run the experiment as the lead. We gave him the same low dosage that the other subject was given, but it wasn't enough for him. He was still in pain and didn't notice any benefits from it, so we upped the dosage. After that, He mentioned that he felt younger and had more energy, but he was still having issues from the renal disease that were making life difficult. My team could tell the medicine was helping him, and after much deliberation, we upped the dosage again. The man, on double the dosage we deemed safe, felt great. He said he would wake up early and do some light cardio to start his morning, have a coffee, which is bad since it's a diuretic, and report to his dialysis. Everything was looking good, which gave us a lot of hope. This all took a turn when we found out his kidneys went from losing 80% of their functionality to 95%. The doctors couldn't believe that his body was only 4 to 6 weeks from completely shutting down, and he was living like there was nothing wrong with him at all. We reached out to them and told them about the remedy we had him on, and they were shocked. They wanted to buy it off us, right then and there, for their own research. But we declined. Then they tried to hire me, but I knew if the testing we'd been doing was a success, I wouldn't need to work much longer. People who create medicine usually have life made once it's commercially available. Everything was great for my patient until he started taking more than our dosage recommendation. He came in for his weekly checkup and looked horrible. His eyes had deep bags around them, and he had lost 9 pounds in a week. He said he could only sleep 2 hours a night, at most, and he could barely eat. On top of this, he couldn't feel pain the same. When asked if he was serious, he punched a metal door and looked me dead in the eyes, saying he couldn't feel it. We told him only to take what was recommended, but he wouldn't listen. He wanted to live, and my medicine made him feel better, but he needed more and more to keep the feeling. We started dropping off daily doses at his front door to make sure he wouldn't overdose on it like he previously had, instead of giving him a bottle with a week's dosage. What he started doing was holding on to about 3 to 4 days worth of doses, then taking them all at the same time. I wish I would have known this earlier, and we would have started administering them in person daily. This continued for 3 more weeks before we stopped hearing from him. We couldn't reach him, but his wife came in to talk to us. She begged us to stop giving him the medicine, and we agreed to, seeing there was a serious problem. After a week without us giving him medicine, he came back and agreed to stay in our clinic and allow us to monitor him for 24 hours a day. We administered the correct amount every morning and allowed him to eat, sleep, exercise, and browse the internet from our clinic. If he needed to go anywhere, one of us would go with him. Everything was going well until one night when I was watching him. He slept for a half hour before waking up and clawing at his eyes. He cut deep gashes into his cheeks and screamed that he was scared. I tried to restrain him, but he was too big for me to hold down. He ran to our lab area and found our sterile scissors and began cutting himself. I called my coworkers and they rushed down to the lab. By the time everyone was there, he'd cut into his wrists so many times we could see bone. It was the most horrific sight I'd ever seen. But he couldn't feel it. His screams were from the terror of not feeling it instead of pain. He began questioning if this was real life or if he was in hell. We finally restrained him, but we were sure he was as good as dead. We bandaged him up, but he lost a scary amount of blood. He somehow lived through it and went back to sleep. We all agreed to stay there for the night, and my coworker slept in the bunk area. He woke up an hour later and told me the voices in his head wouldn't let him sleep. I asked what the voices were saying, but I couldn't believe what he said. "You're supposed to be dead," and "Let me take you already," were what he heard. Over and over he heard this. We agreed to stop giving him the treatment. Clearly, whatever we were giving him wasn't safe for humans. We kept him for screening even after we stopped, but it got worse. He tried to hold his breath until he passed out just so he could sleep. He wouldn't eat anything for days at a time. He heard voices every day and would beg for us to put him under just so he could rest. Last night, he broke out of the restraints and attacked my coworker. He grabbed a butter knife out of our break room and sawed at his throat until he cut through his windpipe. We were called and rushed to the clinic to see him sitting down in the kitchen. He had his throat cut for nearly 10 minutes by the time we got there, and he was still alive. It wasn't a clean cut, but this would have killed a normal person by then. I asked him why he did it, and he claimed the voices told him if he didn't die soon, they'd be there to take him themselves. We called paramedics, but he died in the ambulance ride to the hospital. I quit my job. The gashes, screams, and bloodstains on the floor were too much for me. They weren't looking into my remedy anymore, and were certain it was stupid to let a college student lead an experiment of this capacity. I hope that chemical never sees the light of day again.